Britain's new Prime Minister wanted his first days in office to set a tone and deliver some tangible relief from the seemingly ever-present cost of living crisis. So, Andy Burnham reached for his Manchester mayoral playbook. He needed bold moves with high symbolic value and relatively little cost. As mayor, he made an early splash by promising to end rough sleeping and ensure a bed every night for those without a roof over their head. It worked. Until it didn't. A sharp decline in rough sleeping was reversed after the COVID pandemic. It has risen for the last 4 years and created a perverse incentive for homeless people to head to Manchester, putting enormous pressure on the city's social housing. To put it politely, it's not clear how he can keep his promise on a national level. A better, cheaper bus service, the B network, was a centrepiece of Mayor Burnham's much vaunted Manchesterism, and now he's offering all of England a bus service bonus, a £2 cap on pretty much all local fares. It has a feel-good ring to it, but it is hardly a game changer. The third element of Burnham's hit-the-ground-running trifecta wasn't made in Manchester, but it does reflect his talent for identifying where people are feeling real pain. Scrapping VAT on energy bills from October won't stop them going up, but it does tell voters that when it comes to the cost of living, he gets it, and he's serious about finding ways to help. But is he serious? More to the point, is he seriously different from Keir Starmer when it comes to changing the big economic picture rather than making gestures? Here's where the early days in Number 10 revive a critique aired by some in Manchester, that Andy Burnham was great at the retail politics, less good at taking tough strategic decisions. Here are a couple of big decisions that it now seems the PM has backed away from. Having indicated his interest in raising the threshold amount you can earn before income tax kicks in, his team has now made it plain that will not happen. And having appointed former Defence Secretary John Healey as Chancellor, the same John Healey who insisted that defence spending must get to 3% of national income by 2030, government sources are now cagey on how high defence spending can go. The truth is, the bold, brave Andy Burnham of Manchester is already running up against the reality of an altogether different, exponentially more difficult job. He promised to stick to Rachel Reeves's fiscal rules to show the markets how disciplined he is. He is sticking to a Labour manifesto commitment not to raise the taxes that matter most to working people: income tax, VAT, and national insurance. Beyond his headline-catching opening moves, how does he rewire the economy and rebuild Britain? As ever in politics, if you want to do the big things, you either cut your spending elsewhere or you raise more in tax. PM Burnham cannot escape tough choices that Mayor Burnham never had to make. This is The Times at 1 on Times Radio with Stephen Sackur. Well, Downing Street has announced that it will lower the cap on bus fares from £3 to £2 across England from January. It is back to the level where Labour inherited it from the Tories in 2024. Let us reflect on what it says about Burnham as PM and what he's bringing with him from Manchester. Joshi Hermann is founder of the online newspaper, the Manchester Mill. He has covered Andy Burnham as mayor and thought about what his mayoralty tells us about what he'll do as PM for a long, long time. Joshi Hermann, welcome to the Times at 1. I'm interested to know whether the first 2-3 days of Andy Burnham as PM have surprised you or not, given what you know about him.
I think not surprised me, but I think they've reaffirmed why the Labour Party wanted Andy Burnham rather than some of the alternatives and rather than his predecessor, which is that he effectively knows the most important thing in politics is to tell a story. What is the story that you are telling about your values and what you want to do with the country? So these early moves you're talking about, the bus move, the VAT on electricity, They are not enormous savings for the average consumer. They're welcome, but they're not enormous. But they start to tell a story. I am on your side. I know that your supermarket shop is really expensive. I know that it's really difficult to get into town if you live on the edge of town because of the price of buses. And I am going to try to solve that. And I remember in Manchester, when the B network started, I was always struck by people talked about the £2 tickets more than they talked about all the things that we policy people or journalists would talk about to do with the integration, to do with the setting of the routes, etc. People noticed the price first, obviously. And I think Burnham has sort of internalized that message.
That's really interesting what you're saying about telling a story, telling it quickly and strongly. But in the end, stories are then scrutinized and the details are unpicked. Do you think Andy Burnham is good at sweating the detail, which he's going to have to do? And some people would say even these early moves, early announcements suggest he hasn't really thought them all through. For example, is the cutting of VAT off energy bills, is it really funded? Even some on his own side say it's not.
Yeah, I've expressed a certain amount of skepticism over the past few months that Andy Burnham really has like a plan, that he's someone who's been thinking about exactly what he wants to do. I think he's been thinking about wanting to be Prime Minister for a long time. I think he's been thinking that his set of values and his communication skills would make him a good Prime Minister. But I don't think he's been ready with a plan. And I think we can kind of already see that, the mess around the funding of his first promise, etc. So I think you are going to see more instances like that. I mean, it's, to be fair to him, he hasn't had long to prepare since he won the Makerfield by-election. The counter argument is, you've wanted this job for a very long time. What did you cook up, at the back of the shop ready for this? And that's maybe what's being tested at the moment.
Talking of specific surprises, were you surprised that he chose to make his signature move on day one, literally as he was about to enter the door at number 10, a move all about eradicating rough sleeping across the nation? Because it was something he said at the beginning of his mayoralty in Manchester, and it's something that your newspaper has been in the lead in investigating and suggesting that he has fundamentally failed to deliver.
I was really surprised, because I think what it does on day one is it gets everyone talking about you as someone who makes populist promises that you can't deliver. I noticed under his tweet, he did a tweet announcing it on his first day as Prime Minister. Dozens of people were sharing a graph that we created at the Mill showing the numbers. And the numbers tell a very clear story. He became mayor in 2017. There was an awful lot of rough sleeping in Greater Manchester, about 250 people at the annual sort of snapshot count. And that fell during the first 4 or so years or 3 years of his mayoralty. And then it has risen every year for the past 4 years. We were the ones who revealed the most recent figure. Why? Because every single year as mayor, Burnham's team has released that number, that snapshot number, with a big press release. This year, they didn't release it. We had to go looking for it. We got the number, and that's why that graph has been kind of sharing around social media. So I was surprised, because I think the message it sends is, this guy is unrealistic, this guy's making promises that he can't fulfill. And I think that will ultimately be damaging to him at a national level in the same way it has been damaging to his credibility in Greater Manchester.
And in brief, when you look at his opening couple of days and his words on how much he's determined to help the NEET, that is the young people who are not in education, employment or training, his determination to construct a generation-defining wave of new council houses, his radical reform plans for social care, do you get the feeling that he hasn't yet sort of come away from that inclination to make big picture promises without thinking through how delivery works?
Yeah, I don't think you change when you're you're in your 50s or something and you've been doing this for a long time. I think the way you do politics is going to stay the same. The way Andy Burnham does politics is he makes very big promises. He aligns himself with what he feels are sort of almost moral campaigns. He's got this favoured phrase that he always uses: how can it be right that? How can it be right this? And I think that is how he's going to do it. And the really interesting thing, as you said in your intro, is okay, which trade-offs are you going to accept in order to make these spending pledges? The social care thing would be enormously expensive, for example. What kind of trade-offs are you willing to accept? If you talk about NEETs and getting people back into work, you normally have to invest a lot up front to get people back into work if you're talking about back to work programs that are really kind of successful. Which kind of spending cuts in other parts of welfare are you willing to accept? When you're the mayor of Greater Manchester, you don't have to make a lot of difficult trade-offs because you get pots of money from the government to spend on X and you spend it on X. And he's done that well. You don't really have to cut this bit to spend on that bit. So that's a very new test. That's a test that he hasn't experienced since he was a cabinet minister, which is a very, very long time ago.
Joshi Hermann, we thank you very much indeed for joining us on The Times at One. That's Joshi Hermann, founder of the Manchester Mill.